Okay, see, we have a bunch of people here. We've got 10 people in already. Great. We have more people coming in. Let's, microphone, let's check. 1, 2, 3. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tim Wilson, and I am the Assistant Vice President for Student Development, and I'm the Interim Dean of Students here at Seattle University. And I want to welcome you to our winter webinar. We've got Luke Green with us, who is the Director of our Office of Fellowships, and he will be talking about how you can support your student and getting fellowships for themselves to further their education. Luke has been in this role for 11 years. He's fantastic at what he does. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Luke, and I will let you know that we do have a chat function. So as you have questions or if you're experiencing difficulties, please go ahead and just forward us a message through the chat function, and we'll do our best to resolve any issues or answer your questions as we go along. So I'm going to hand it over to Luke right now.
Okay, hello everyone. Good morning, and thanks for joining us for this webinar about the Office of Fellowships and how you can support your students as they search for various kinds of academic funding. So, assuming you can all see the beginning of this PowerPoint presentation. So I'm just going to go ahead and get started.
How do I make this sound go?
Okay. I can't hear them. Okay, so
I want to talk to you, but I want to hear.
Sounds like somebody's asking a question. If you're having trouble with the sound, you may want to check the volume control computer. Okay, so yeah, everything we do really starts with this statement, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, the Seattle University mission statement. And I'm sure you've heard this many times as you and your students looked at SU and toured campus. We tend to sort of zero in on the professional formation aspect of the mission, because we really view the work that we do in the Office of Fellowships as a part of getting them ready for their professional and academic careers after SU. What we do is very much in parallel with their coursework here and the other kinds of extracurricular experiences they might have. But we're also doing everything with a view to what comes after for them in terms of post-baccalaureate study or research, graduate school, and eventually
I think it has to do
their
with that thing.
Okay. So one of the first questions I usually get about the work of the Office of Fellowships is, what is a fellowship, and is it like a scholarship? What's the difference between those terms? Another term that gets thrown around is grant, and these three things can often be sort of mixed together, and the terminology itself can be a little confusing. So just to start on that, the term fellowship, since it's in the name of our office, the Office of Fellowships, is basically more similar than a scholarship to something like a job. So it's actually money to go do something specific. And usually it's some kind of formal recognition of membership in an academic association or group. So there is an academic topic or a research topic or a social issue, and an organization or an institution has created a fellowship basically to support students, researchers, and professionals to participate in some kind of activity, usually group-based activity, to engage with that subject matter. So it's, in other words, a fellowship is money to go do some kind of specific activity related to a specific subject. They are very often, almost in all cases, competitive and funded positions. So like regular employment, they are paid, and usually that pay comes in the form of a stipend that is very much like a paycheck. Unlike a job, they are almost always for a limited amount of time. So usually 6 months or a year, up to 2 years can be common. But there are also very short-term fellowships that are for very limited activities, such as short-term programs, seminars or conferences on certain topics, or training programs or research activities. And those can be as short as, a week or 5 weeks. We work with a lot of fellowships that are usually take place during the summer months and are maybe 5, 6, or 7 weeks long. We also work with fellowships that are a full calendar year and are during that year very basically indistinguishable from employment. So that's a little different than a scholarship, which is usually, and this is the term most people are familiar with. A scholarship is, in most cases, academic funding for applicants who meet certain merit-based criteria. So students can apply for scholarships if they meet criteria and stand out in a scholarship competition. They're awarded funding, and that funding just typically goes to their tuition or other costs or fees associated with their education. So instead of going to participate in a program or fulfill a certain kind of role or participate in a research project, it's just money that comes in and pays for their educational costs. Now that I've defined those terms and it sounds clear, you should know that to some extent those terms are interchangeable. And what I say to students is, as you're looking for funding, the most important thing is really not whether something's called a scholarship or a fellowship. The most important thing to understand about a program is its mission, its eligibility criteria, and their deadlines. So what you're looking for is a good fit for a particular academic or research interest or professional interest, not so much whether something is called a scholarship or fellowship. So the next thing we end up talking to our students about is where do you begin looking for various kinds of funding? And there are many, many resources out there, both based in universities and institutions and also kind of commercially oriented websites out there on the internet. The one that most people have heard of is FastWeb, and that is an online database of scholarship information oriented towards college students. But when I first meet with students and I start talking to them about how they look for funding, I usually issue a caveat with when they talk about looking for things on the internet. Basically, you should know that most internet databases like FastWeb have become vehicles for various kinds of organizations and institutions to market themselves. So just to explain that in more detail, when I signed up with sort of a dummy account on FastWeb a couple of years ago to test out what it was all about. And while it does give you access to scholarship information, it also basically shares or sells your information to institutions that are trying to market themselves. So even though I've tried to unplug myself from that dummy account, I still get calls from universities, schools, online programs that got my information from FastWeb and are basically just trying to recruit me as a student. So you just need to be cautious as you go out onto the internet and look for things. And you should never, ever pay for information. So basically there are numerous and extremely helpful resources available for free, housed on university websites all across the country, including ours. And that's what I will talk about next. So basically when I meet with a student and we're in the initial phases of talking about what they're interested in, what they're studying here at the university, and whether or not they might be interested in pursuing competitive merit-based opportunities that we work with, I often advise them to start with our webpage in their search. And I do see it as a beginning, because admittedly our fellowship resources are limited. We did not even attempt to capture all of the thousands and thousands of scholarship programs that are out there. Basically, what I have done over the years is try to create a list of scholarship programs that reflects the interests, the strengths, and academic majors of our students here at Seattle University. So this is very much a list of opportunities that is tailored to the students who are here and also graduates of our university. So the very last slide of this presentation will have our URL for our website, but it's very easy to remember. It's just seattleu.edu/fellowships. You can also go to the SU homepage, and in the search field, just type in fellowships, and you can also find us that way. That will take you to the page that you see now. And on that page on the left-hand side, circled there in red, is a menu item called Fellowship Opportunities. And if you click on that, it will take you to this page. And this page needs just a little bit of explanation because it's got two sort of different things going on here. So in the middle section there, you see a list that's entitled Focus Programs, that's circled in blue. And basically what that is a very short list. If you actually go to the web page, you can scroll down and see what's there. That's a very short focused list of programs that we work with most often here at Seattle University, and they're sort of broken out by category. And you'll see under each sort of category heading, there's only one or a few programs listed there. And again, that's because those are the programs that our office has the resources to basically create formal advising processes for and to go out and recruit students for. So we have applicants for those programs from SU every single year, year in and year out. They've turned out to be a very good fit for our students. That said, there are many more programs listed here under the menu options to the left, and that's the left-hand menu that's sort of boxed in red there. So this part's a little confusing. Basically, if you look at focus programs, the first category there is humanities and social sciences. If you look at the drop-down menu on the left, there's also a category there called humanities and social sciences. They're not the same thing. So if you click on humanities and social sciences on the left-hand menu, that will take you to an expanded list of programs. And there's going to be dozens and dozens of scholarships listed under that menu item rather than the one program that's sitting there under focus programs. So I advise everybody to navigate through those left-hand menu items, because that's where the bulk of our program information is listed. And I really see that as a great first step for you and your students to take in terms of searching for relevant funding opportunities. So you can click around in categories that seem like they might fit the interests of your students and just get a sense of what's there. Every program description has a link to the program website, and you can kind of click around and start getting a sense of the programs that might be available. So that's just a quick description of how to start with our web-based resources. There are other strategies from there, and that's where it's important for our office to be directly in contact with your students about their interests and sort of what they're looking for. And we can talk about other ways for them to search if they don't find opportunities here on our webpage. Okay, so what is our office all about? What do we actually do? What's our function? So basically, the very first stage is kind of what I described. When a student comes in, the first thing I try to do is hear their story and to learn about what drives them. Why have they chosen a certain major here at SU, or what majors are they thinking about? What do they see when they imagine themselves after graduation? What kind of careers have they considered? And especially what problems in the world do they want to solve or engage in or engage with through a career or through research. It's really hard to start identifying funding opportunities without having a sense of that story. And that's where I think an advisor separates him or herself from an online database where you're just kind of plugging in some demographic information and hoping that a computer program spits out programs that fit with you. It's far better for a person to sit down with another human being, share that kind of story, that kind of narrative, and start understanding what the student is all about. So that's stage one of our process, is hearing that story and then turning around and trying to identify programs that are even in the ballpark in terms of fit, and also in terms of where they're at in their educational trajectory. The next stage is really broken up into several functions, and this is where this all comes after a student has identified one or more programs that they want to apply for, and we've identified the deadline. We've sort of looked at how much time we have before that deadline hits, whether it's a few weeks or a few years, and then we sort of start this process of creating the most competitive application possible. So that most of the time, just due to the nature of these kinds of programs, looks like writing consultation, and specifically writing consultation within the genre of grant writing, which some of you may be familiar with. And I see that genre of writing as basically being all about creating arguments for funding, very compelling, very relevant arguments to obtain funding. And that's a genre of writing that's very new to most of the advisees that we work with. They're very used to writing papers for class or writing maybe personal statements for college, but they haven't yet tried to write an essay or a project proposal that is really meant to convince a highly critical readership to provide them with fairly large sums of money to accomplish their goals and objectives. And it requires some different kinds of thinking than maybe they're accustomed to. So that is what we sort of buckle down and do with students. We teach them this genre of writing and go through, in most cases, a very extensive process of essay review, feedback, and revision that is all meant to help them add this skill of grant writing to their toolkit. We also do practice interviews for processes that require that. Many scholarship programs in the latter stages of their review process have integrated interviews, and in some cases, like with the Truman Scholarship or maybe the Rhodes Scholarship, they are maybe the most challenging and intimidating interviews that applicants will ever have in their lives. We have gotten that feedback from students who've participated in these interviews and then gone out and gotten very competitive jobs, at Microsoft or Google or in the federal government, and they always come back and say, the interview I did for the Truman Scholarship, for example, was by far the hardest interview I ever had. So we really try to do our best to help them prepare for what can be a very intimidating and stressful interview experience, so that they're just as prepared as possible. A lot of the writing that students do, just due to the academic nature of these programs, is really built around research and takes the form of a formal research proposal, which again, like with the grant writing piece, is something that students are doing for the first time. And even students who are, say, in the College of Science and Engineering, who you would think would be writing things like research proposals a lot, they end up actually not having those experiences, maybe till later in their college career, or maybe not even until after they've graduated. So I see this as a really special and unique opportunity for students who think they might pursue academic careers to engage in this process of drafting research proposals with a lot of advisory support, instead of waiting until after they've graduated and have to do that sort of in a vacuum or on their own. And then the last bullet there is basically academic planning. They have many other resources for this on campus. There are academic advisors and other support services on campus, but we try to sort of integrate ourselves into that overall holistic approach to advising here at SU. We really don't view academic planning as a separate part from their discernment process as they move through their college career. We absolutely want to be identifying scholarship programs that are relevant to them and to the things that they care most about. And that should have something to do with the things they're studying here at SU. And also things like internships or study abroad or the kinds of languages they're learning. Just basically another piece of that total education they're getting here. So what do these applications look like? They are, in most cases, not, if you're familiar with like federal grants, they are not, even though I call this grant writing, they don't look like a formal grant application. They really look maybe closer in some ways to a college application, or maybe they're sort of in between those two things. But basically there's pieces of the application that you might expect. An application form, which these days is mostly online, and that's going to ask all of the kinds of questions that you would expect. Where are you from? What are you majoring in? What do your grades look like? What are your career goals? Activities, employment, languages spoken or studied, international travel, things like that. Those are all very common kinds of questions on application forms. And then we get into the essays, which are usually things like a statement of purpose or a project proposal, personal statements, which everybody is usually familiar with from their college application. And those pieces are the things we spend by far the most time on. And that's this writing process that I've referred to, which, you know, we usually recommend taking place over the course of 3 to 6 months prior to a scholarship deadline. Transcripts, obviously, for most programs. Letters of recommendation, and 3 is very typical in terms of the number of recommendations students will need. And these are very, very important. So one thing I wanted to convey to all of you today is one way to support your students as they are considering programs like this is to strongly encourage them to build and maintain relationships with their faculty mentors, because that's where the best and most suitable letters of recommendation come from. I would say that the more sort of sustained that relationship building is, the better the letters are. And it makes perfect sense. The better faculty members know their students on a personal level, the better sense they have of that student's research or academic goals, the more specific their letter can be. And that's a really important aspect of a good letter of recommendation. I'll also say that more and more letters of recommendation are becoming the critical piece for competitive applications. The reason being is, you know, we deal with things like grade inflation here in higher education, and students have resources like offices of fellowships through which they get advice that can, in some cases, lead to essays that start sounding similar, sort of on a national scale. And for scholarship foundations, it becomes very difficult in some cases to discern what look to be just a group of excellent students kind of across the board. So they turn more and more often to letters to really start to make sense of who's who and what people are capable of. Because a good letter of recommendation will be very specific and also convey sort of the good with the bad. It will talk about strengths and weaknesses. So scholarship foundations really find this to be an incredibly important part of their review process. And resumes, often a common piece of applications these days as well. And we provide feedback on all of these parts of an application, and really always are trying to take a step back and ask, okay, are all of these different aspects of this application working well in conjunction with each other and sort of form a clear, coherent, and cohesive picture of who this person is. So I want to talk a little bit about the competitive aspect of these programs. Our office works with scholarships and fellowships that across the board are all, first of all, funded outside of Seattle University. So we don't advise students as they apply for internally funded programs or SU-specific scholarships. We're looking at programs that are funded by private foundations or the federal government. And in addition to that, all of these programs, while they have in some cases other kinds of criteria, they all have merit criteria as part of their review process. And you can probably guess to some extent what that means. Since they're academic scholarships, a lot of that is going to rest simply on grades, on GPA, and whether or not a student has done well in their major courses versus other kinds of classes they've taken here at the university. But it also sort of goes beyond just that sort of cumulative number that is represented with GPA. They're looking for other indications that a student is excelling in his or her area of study. And that is demonstrated by things they do outside of the classroom, such as research experiences they've had, internships, volunteer work, leadership experiences, campus involvement. And then, as I mentioned before, letters of recommendation are also a major source of information that sort of indicates academic or intellectual performance that is not captured in the GPA. One way that I view or have learned to view merit criteria in general is something I call the golden triangle. And if you imagine a triangle, each point represents a different facet of what foundation review committees look for. And one point is academic excellence. Another point is service work or volunteer work. And a third point is leadership. And even something like, say, there's a scholarship called the Goldwater Scholarship, which emphasizes it's for undergraduates who want to pursue scientific research careers. And you would think that all that might matter for that scholarship is a student's merit in terms of their scientific endeavors and their research activities. And certainly that is a huge aspect of what Goldwater looks for. But they are also looking for these other dimensions. Has a student sort of been a leader on his or her campus? Have they engaged in their community in productive or helpful ways? And how have those activities sort of met with or been tied up in their research interests? So that's something for your students to think about as they move through their career here. Are there other things that they can do that are in the category of their interests, but outside of the normal requirements of their coursework? And I'll just say that Seattle U has just an innumerable number, just a wealth of opportunities for students to be engaged in their community here or in the greater Seattle area, leadership opportunities and service work. I think that's one of the strengths of our institution. So that is absolutely something for them to keep in mind as they consider not just competitive scholarships, but also things like graduate school applications and, of course, seeking employment after they finish their studies. So the programs we work with, again, all merit-based, which means they're very competitive. I would say the least competitive program, maybe some of the less competitive Fulbright countries, are around 20 to 25% in terms of their acceptance rate. And I would say the most competitive programs I work with, like the Carnegie Endowment Research Fellowship or the Rhodes Scholarship or the Gates Cambridge Scholarship, are down around 2 or 3% in terms of their acceptance rates. And so people look at that and students are the first thing that they think is, why would I spend my time applying for something that has such a low probability of success? And I ask them, when their thinking goes there, I ask them to keep a couple of things in mind. One is, those numbers capture all applicants, right? Even applicants without good advising support. If you look at the numbers from SU, they're reflected here on this chart. 39% of applicants for these programs, and this is cumulative across all programs, and this data has been collected over the past decade or so. 39% are selected for the things that they apply for. So that's much better than some of the acceptance rates that I just cited. So their chances are actually better than it might look like at first blush. The other thing to keep in mind is that an additional 15% of applicants are recognized in some way. While they may not be accepted for the award, they're listed as finalists or honorable mentions or alternates for programs. And that means a couple of things. It means, first of all, that they were competitive for that program, and that status of finalist or honorable mention is something that they can and should list on their resume or CV. The second thing that means is they should reapply or apply for similar programs. It means they are certainly in that realm of competitive applicant for whatever it was that they went for. So they should really take that as a very positive sign. So what about this other 46%, people who apply and are not accepted to the program? Well, we've basically built our, I'll come back to this slide. This is just some data about our performance with the Fulbright Scholarship, and I'll talk a little bit more about that program in a second. But we've built our services really around that 46% because we view a scholarship or fellowship application as a highly beneficial educational experience in and of itself, irregardless of the outcome of the process, so whether or not they actually got funding. Of course, that is one objective, but there are many other things that come out of giving this a shot. And again, this is really the foundation of our advising philosophy in the Office of Fellowships. And here are a few things that can be positive benefits of applying for a scholarship. First of all, if you give this a shot, you will identify and be able to better articulate your goals. I think a lot of the students, especially freshmen and sophomore students that I meet with, have a very strong felt sense of some things that they're interested in and can describe in sometimes somewhat vague language the kinds of issues or problems that that drive them or that they want to engage with in the world. What these applications, in a sense, force students to do is sit down and locate the language they need to, in detail, articulate what these objectives are for themselves. And there is an enormous learning opportunity there, where students learn about themselves and the things that they are interested in. And in some cases, through this process, realize, hey, maybe actually the name I was giving to this interest isn't the right name. Now that I'm really diving in and exploring this, what I'm actually interested in is over here. So they may actually not even end up applying for that program because through trying, they've discovered that it's actually something else they're interested in. So that's a great opportunity for students to learn about themselves. This is one thing I can basically guarantee, is that students will become better writers through this process. Our advising does not really look like the kind of feedback that they will get through their courses, where they might submit a paper, they get a grade, maybe some comments, maybe even a meeting with their professor and get some feedback on their writing, and then it kind of stops there. We engage in an extended writing consultation process with our students that ideally lasts the better part of an academic year. So we're trying to identify deadlines that are coming up for them the next year and starting to work with them on the applications this year. So that writing process may take 3, 6, even 8 months. And we're talking about documents that are 2 or 3 pages long. So you can imagine over that period of time, we go through 20, 30, maybe even 40 drafts of an essay. And that might sound crazy, but that's why I can guarantee this outcome, because they learn how to communicate effectively, specifically to a highly critical audience that is trying to make decisions about funding. So it's, again, another great supplement to their education here and an opportunity to become better at the craft of grant writing. They'll build a network of colleagues, either through requesting letters of recommendation from their supervisors, from faculty, having conversations with those individuals about their reasons for applying for competitive scholarships. And then some scholarship programs themselves, the Fulbright Scholarship is a great example, require applicants to go out and build actual partnerships with people in their field of study. So the Fulbright Scholarship is a US government-funded scholarship that allows students to go abroad for a full academic year and conduct study or research projects that the students themselves design. And the Fulbright requires that those applicants make contact with somebody in their host country and that will support them during the course of that project. So you can imagine that even if the Fulbright application itself is not successful, they have established a contact in a country they're interested in. And that, in many cases, becomes an ongoing professional relationship that lasts, into their postgraduate career. So that's a very valuable outcome of applications as well. Again, like I said, being an applicant for an institutional nominee, finalist for a scholarship is something that can be put on a resume. And of course, being a recipient of a scholarship like this should also help students become more competitive as they apply for graduate school, research positions, or employment. And then, of course, obtaining funding is an objective we have. We don't pretend that we're not interested in that. Of course, we want students to be successful in these programs with their applications. And we don't ignore the great opportunities that come from actually becoming a Fulbright Scholar or a Truman Scholar or receiving a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Those kinds of achievements will open doors that will last the duration of their professional lives. So those are, again, some benefits for or benefits of applying for a scholarship. Before I move forward, I want to go back to this slide, actually, just to show you kind of where we sit nationally. And I apologize for this chart. It's actually would not be readable on its own. I realized I forgot to name the key on the right, so I have to describe what this is representing. So first of all, this is our performance with the one specific scholarship program over the past, I don't know, I guess it's over 10 years now. The Fulbright U.S. student program, which is the U.S. government's largest scholarship program. It's also the program that we have the most applicants for each year. So you can see that that's grown to somewhere between 15 and 20 applicants every single year. That's what that top blue line is. So the line with the biggest peak there are the number of applicants we've had each year for the Fulbright. The line below that, which is red and is sort of the middle line, are the number of finalists and alternates that have been selected from our applicant pool for the scholarship. And then the bottom line, the green one, are the number of Fulbright recipients that we've had. So you can see, like last year, we had 6 Fulbright scholars. The number 6 doesn't sound that big when you think about, say, class size or the student population here at SU, but you sort of have to keep in mind that that number has been enough for Seattle U to be recognized as a top producer of Fulbright scholars among all master's level universities in the nation. And usually we're in the top 2 or 3 schools in terms of the number of scholars that our institution produces. So having 4 or 5 or 6 recipients of a Fulbright scholarship every year is actually quite a lot for a school of our size and composition. So I guess I'm showing you this as a way to sort of drive home that point that they're at a very good place to seek help for applying for these programs. It should be another reason why they shouldn't pay as much attention to that raw competition statistic and not worry so much about who else in the country or the world is applying for this scholarship, and worry more about, does this program fit with their goals in life? That's what we're more concerned with. We will find a way to give them the best chance possible and find a way for them to be successful. So jumping to sort of the last section here, how can you as parents or family members or supporters, siblings of students here at SU. Just a couple things to keep in mind. One, and the most important thing I would say, is encourage your student to make an appointment with our office. Like, if there's nothing else you remember from this presentation, remember that one single point, because that is where everything begins. This conversation about goals and interests, about what they're passionate about, and then us doing the work of plugging them into the programs that are the best possible fit for whatever that story is. None of that can even get started unless they walk through the door. So they don't need to have chosen a major. They don't need to know exactly what program they're interested in. They don't need to have looked at our website, although that is advisable. I'm happy to meet with folks that are in their first week of studies here, or about to graduate, or have graduated. About 25% of my advisee population are actually alumni of the university. So our services are available to students indefinitely after they've graduated. So it really doesn't matter where they're at, although I would say the earlier they come in, the better. Again, though, the most important thing is come into the office. And I'll share, the last slide is information about how to make an appointment. You can also share the website that I showed you earlier and show them what I shared with you about where the program information is listed. And then also what I mentioned with respect to letters of recommendation, encouraging them to build good working relationships with their faculty members. You know, when I think back to my own undergraduate career, this is one of the things I would do differently. I would go into office hours every week. I would become a nuisance for my faculty members. I would visit with them as often as possible, because they're the ones who can really support students within their specific areas of interest. Okay, there's some information. I believe you'll have access to this presentation afterwards. So our website, to schedule an appointment, that's the first number there. But students and you can also feel free to contact me directly at the number or through email. Okay, so I believe we have some time for questions. And Tim is going to help us pull up any questions that you guys have here via chat. Okay, so feel free to go ahead and use the chat window there to ask any questions you might have. One thing maybe I didn't mention was that these programs cover all academic disciplines. So again, they're not focused. Okay, somebody's asked if we can go back to the last slide of numbers. Yes, absolutely. Oops. Oh. Sorry, jumping around here. I think they meant the phone numbers here and the email address. Could you pull up the chat window again? Sorry, I was saying that if you look through our list of programs, you'll find things there for most academic disciplines that are here at Seattle University. You know, whether your student wants to be an engineer or a doctor, or wants to study sociology or be a poet or an artist, there's usually a good reason to come into the office. So the number of opportunities can vary a bit by area of interest or discipline, but we're usually able to find at least a handful of programs for almost everybody that comes in. Okay. Yeah, feel free to ask any questions. I know I covered a lot of information there, but yeah, can't emphasize enough that the most important thing is for people just to come in and start a conversation with us. Right. So Tim just asked what's the most popular place where people go. So first of all, I mentioned the Fulbright's our most applied for scholarship. And I would say for our students, because there's such a large number of students here interested in doing humanitarian or service work in developing countries, we have many, many applicants to Central and South America, and also Africa, and parts of South and Southeast Asia as well. And Fulbright does fund projects in all of those areas. There are also a group of scholarships available to students that are meant specifically for students who want to acquire a second or third language. And the government has quite a lot of funding for what they define as critical need languages. And you can kind of guess what some of those might be: Chinese, Korean, Arabic, Farsi, languages like that. So the languages that aren't usually represented in American high schools and even undergraduate institutions. So that's another good option for a lot of our students. So there's a question here about fellowships. Are they mostly awarded after graduation? So many of them are, but I would say proportionally it's probably 40% undergraduate opportunities and 60% post-baccalaureate, graduate, and postdoctoral opportunities. So the bulk are for things that happen after graduation, but there are a good chunk that either provide direct tuition assistance for undergraduate during the undergraduate years, or fellowships for opportunities that are specifically for undergraduates. One thing to keep in mind is that programs start becoming available to students usually in their sophomore year, which is another reason I get really excited when freshmen come in, because we have the opportunity to sort of identify programs that become active for them at that very early stage. So a question here about someone's daughter's applying for a fellowship this year. Would it be helpful to meet with you on the process? Yes, absolutely. Even if a program is not on our website, it's not listed there, we are still more than happy to help with applications for those programs. So do you have any advice for scholarships for study abroad? So the few that I just mentioned, Fulbright, what's called the David L. Bourne Scholarship, the Critical Language Scholarship, those three are great options for study abroad or for language learning abroad. And then there are two others that are great options for our students. The first is the Gilman International Scholarship, which is for any undergraduate, and that scholarship provides funding to offset costs associated with the study abroad program. One thing to know about the Gilman is it's for students who are eligible for a Pell Grant. So if your student is Pell eligible, which means they've met certain financial need criteria, and if in addition to that they want to study abroad, the Gilman International Scholarship is a fantastic option. And again, you can find links to all of these programs on our website. Another one like the Gilman is the Freeman Asia Scholarship, but it's restricted to countries in East, Southeast, and South Asia. What year are most applicants sophomore, junior, senior, or grad students? So the bulk of our applicants and awardees are juniors and seniors. That's when, if you looked at the availability of scholarships of the kind that we work with on sort of a line graph, the tip of the bell curve would be in the junior and senior year in terms of availability for programs, and sort of concordantly the greatest number of recipients we have are also juniors, seniors, or probably within a year or two out of from graduation. So there's a so there's a question here about, other than just walking in, where do you recommend we start with our students? I think, if I was on your side of this and I had a student at a university, I would want to have a conversation similar to the one we have with them when they come in. Like, what drives you? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning? What sets your hair on fire? What are the problems that kick you off, or that you want to solve, or that get you going, that you can see yourself applying all of your energy to and all of your capability to? And that's not something that most people have especially at, you know, the undergraduate stage, have like an easy, concise, or immediate answer for. But it's important to try and answer it, because it's through that process of attempting to articulate the answer to that question that people and our students learn what it is. And so I think you can do that at home or when you talk to your student on the phone. I think that's a great place to start. And we're just yet another resource that can help them carry on that conversation. Okay, how are we on? I think we're about at time. So unless there's any sort of final questions, I think we can wrap up. And yeah, thank you for your time. I think Tim wants to say something here as well.
So first, I want to thank Luke for providing us with a lot of great information on fellowships. And yes, I see a couple questions coming in. So yes, we will send you the presentation. We will send you a PDF version of the slides. So all the information that Luke has shared with you, we will send to you by the end of the week. We will also have this recording. So what we've done in the past, and we'll do with this one, is that we will take this recording of the webinar today and we'll post it to our YouTube site. So once that is done, we'll let you know how you can access that as well. And we'll also put the link up on the Parent Family Engagement Facebook page. So again, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank Luke for coming here with us. And we will be having another webinar in the probably early spring quarter as well, titled to be determined, but we will let you know when that comes about. Till then, have a great rest of the day and happy 2017.
Well.